Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Hidden Heart by Emily Royal, narrated by Polly Lee. Chapter 1. St. George's Hospital, London, 1822. "I've been able to save your sight, Major Hart, but there was little I could do for your face. I'm afraid you'll be scarred for life." Devon rolled to one side, turning his back on the doctor. Shortly after, he heard a case snap shut, then quick footsteps faded into the distance. The sawbones had recognised Devon's dismissal. Either that, or he'd wished to remove himself from Devon's presence as quickly as possible. And why should he not? Judging by the expression on the doctor's face when he'd removed the bandages, Devon was now a monster, a twisted ogre from picture books designed to frighten small boys. And women. If what the doctor said was true, rather than smile and fall at his feet, they'd scream at the sight of him. A cold lassitude rippled over him, no doubt due to the laudanum the doctor had administered. Waiting for oblivion, he watched the nurses weave their way between the beds, tending to the other patients. In the distance, a form, brighter than the rest, moved about, and he blinked to clear his vision. It was a young woman, accompanied by a primly dressed matriarch, and they were walking in his direction. He turned his head as they passed by, but he couldn't resist catching a glimpse. The young woman stopped and turned briefly, and their eyes met. They were the most beautiful eyes he had ever seen. A deep, warm brown mahogany colour, the rich, exotic kind from which the most delectable pieces were fashioned. She was an angel. But, delectable as the creature was, she'd likely scream if Devon removed his bandages. A flash of understanding and compassion shone in her expression. It was as if the air had left the room, leaving the two of them, twin souls, staring at each other across a giant chasm. Then her companion issued a sharp word, and she turned and resumed her path out of the ward. Devon's heart tightened. Was it the cruelty of fate that had caused the mere glimpse of a pretty girl to touch his heart, now he was an ogre with no chance of securing any woman's love? Or was it the drug-induced melancholy that had caused his soul to cry out at the sight of her? But she'd never look twice at a man such as him, a disfigured demon. The coughs and moans of Devon's fellow inmates swirled in the air, growing in intensity until they became battle cries. He covered his ears, but the cries had entered his mind, as they often did at night. "Take my hand, Devon." A voice from the wilderness cut through the screams. Fossett, his faithful friend, the man who'd saved his life when his fellow soldiers had passed him by, the one man who stood by him resolutely no matter what he did. And Devon had done a lot in the name of self-gratification. Was he now reaping the rewards of his sins? Would they cheer at his downfall, the husbands he'd cuckolded, the fathers whose daughters he'd ruined? Would they delight in the fact that his one defining feature, his face, which had been likened to that of Adonis, was now destroyed? And would his brother Dexter tell him that without his looks, he was as useless as Dexter had always believed him to be? The screams turned to laughter, then the darkness claimed him, and he surrendered to it. "What the devil have you been up to now, old chap?" The familiar voice roused Devon from his stupor. He turned his head toward the voice and heard a low curse. "You look like bloody Ramses the voice said. Devon opened his eyes and blinked in the morning light. Fossett stood, bold as brass, in the centre of Devon's bedchamber, hands on hips. Unwilling to see the expression on his best friend's face, Devon focused on the rug at Fossett's booted feet. "How did you get in?" "Your butler admitted me." "Bloody Peterson," Devon snorted. "I told him to admit no one. Did he say that the monster was on display for your entertainment?" Fossett sighed. "As a matter of fact, he said, and I quote, 'The master is in need of a friend.'" Any moment, Fossett's expression would turn into pity. The last thing Devon wanted was to be pitied. "Who, in the name of damnation, is bloody Ramses I?" Devon asked. "The Egyptian king, whose tomb Signore Belzoni discovered a few years ago." "So I look like a corpse?" "Good Lord, no." Fossett laughed. "I only mean that you look as if you've been mummified, with half your head covered in bandages. With your interest in the arts, you should be well versed in history. Belzoni's discovery was in all the papers." "Just because I'm fond of poetry doesn't make me a historian," Devon said, "or an archaeologist. I've seen enough death on the battlefield, we both have, to harbour any interest in dead kings. Poetry and literature are different subjects to ancient history. But you wouldn't understand that, given that your father had to pay for your gentleman's degree." "Careful, Dev," Fossett said. "If you recall, my degree was awarded on the basis of my prowess in Oxford's fencing arena. I could well show you that the sword is, in fact, mightier than the pen." Almost as soon as he'd spoken, Fossett grimaced. "Apologies," he said. "That was a thoughtless thing to say." "What, given that my face has been sliced in two?" Devon asked. "It was a broken gin bottle, not a soldier's sword, that performed the deed." "Ouch," Fossett said. "Where did it happen?" "Down by the docks." Fossett rolled his eyes. "Peterson said something about a lady of ill repute. Did she change her mind and fight you off?" "If you must know, she was being set upon by a gang of men," Devon said. "I intervened, and one of them got lucky." "What about the whore?" "She took me to the hospital." "She didn't rob you?" Fossett asked. "But then you'd just saved her life." He gestured toward Devon's face. "Isn't it time you removed the bandages? The wound would heal much better exposed to the fresh air." "We're not in the field now," Devon said. "They'll have to come off eventually." "Has Peterson put you up to this?" Fossett had the grace to look uncomfortable. "He has your best interest at heart, as do I." "Perhaps I'll wait another day." "You must face it sooner or later," Fossett said. "Here and now with a trusted friend would be better than in solitude." "I don't want your pity," Dev growled. "I can better cope with the ridicule of society or the harsh instructions of my brother, whereas you're immune to my rudeness." "I always thought that was something to be admired in a friend." Fossett was right most of the time, but sometimes kindness brought forth emotions that a man had no right to experience or display to others. "Perhaps you'd care to join me in a brandy," Devon said. "I don't think I could reveal my face sober." "I think you should reveal it now," Fossett said, his voice insistent, "before you drink yourself into a stupor." "Don't tell me bloody Peterson sent you in here to bully me." Fossett grinned. "Your butler is a man of excellent perception." "What did he say about me?" "He said that whether or not a man looked like an ogre was by the by. It was his temperament which mattered. And he said your temper these past few days has been enough to frighten all the children of London into having nightmares. Coming from a man who generally seems stoic, who served you long enough to understand your disposition, I'd say that was something of a historic statement. Then perhaps you could have it etched on my tomb, for Signore Belzoni and his gravediggers to unearth. Fossett folded his arms. I'll not leave here until you rise and face your fate. Bloody hell! Would Fossett throw those words at him again? The very same words he'd uttered on the battlefield when Devon had lain, bleeding from a gash to the thigh? He'd wanted to remain on the ground and melt into the earth as his life essence pumped away. But Fossett had put paid to that. Surrounded by enemies in the middle of a muddy field, his friend had forced Devon to stand through sheer force of will, then carried him across the landscape, picking his way over the dead bodies of their fallen comrades. There was no stopping Fossett when he'd set his mind on something. Heaven help any poor girl Fossett set his sights on for marriage. Devon climbed out of bed and reached for his banyan. Very well. Let's get on with it. Well, how bad does it look? Fossett remained silent, but a twitch of his eyebrow told Devon he'd heard the question. After removing the bandages, he'd studied Devon's face for what felt like an age. Eventually he nodded, as if he'd been determining what best to say. I dare say it'll improve over time. Let me see. Devon gestured at the shaving mirror in Fossett's hand. Are you sure? You were all for me removing the bandages earlier, Fossett. What's changed? Very well. Fossett placed the mirror face down in Devon's hand. Devon studied the back of the mirror and ran his forefinger along the grain of wood, wincing as a splinter pierced his skin. His stomach tightened in anticipation. But what was the use of nervousness? This particular battle was already lost, and Devon, the vanquished, must confront the outcome. Gritting his teeth, he turned the mirror over. His heart stopped, and he caught his breath at the apparition before him. At first, his mind refused to believe what he saw. He blinked, but the apparition remained. Then he closed his eyes and counted to 10 before opening them again. The monster continued to stare at him, horror and disgust in its expression. Devon gritted his teeth, and the beast mirrored the gesture. He turned his head to one side, and the monster followed suit. There was no denying it. The monster in the reflection was him. The left side of his face was undamaged, but an angry red mark bisected his right cheek. Jagged at the edges, it curled around his cheek, as if the devil himself had etched a sinister smile on his flesh. The wound ended just below his right eye, which was distorted where the skin had been pulled tight. The edge of the wound was punctuated with a series of marks like tiny red stab wounds, evidence of the doctor's needlework. But the most grotesque thing of all was the expression in the monster's eyes. The arrogant confidence, which Devon had witnessed in the mirror every morning of his life, was gone. It had been replaced by raw despair. The look of a man who'd lost all trace of hope. A man who'd lost the will to live. It's not as bad as it looks, and it'll fade. Every soldier knows that. Devon closed his eyes to shut out his friend's voice. It was always going to be a shock, seeing it for the first time, Fossett continued. It'll get easier with each viewing. How the fuck would you know? Devon growled. He dropped the mirror, taking comfort from the sound of the glass shattering. Mirrors would no longer be welcome in his home. A hand nudged his, and he closed his fingers round the cold, hard edges of a glass. He opened his eyes to see it was half full with a dark amber liquid. "I thought you'd welcome a brandy," Fossett said. "Ah, so now it was acceptable to get roaring drunk. Not even all the brandy in France would make up for this." Devon gestured toward his face. He gave a cold laugh. "I suppose my womanizing days are over. That'll delight most of the regiment." Fossett cleared his throat, his usual sign of discomfort. They both knew that the rest of the regiment regarded Devon with little favour. He'd used his piratical good looks to charm his way into the beds of too many soldiers' wives and, in some cases, their daughters. Most likely, they'd all say he got his just deserts. He drained the glass, then held it up. "Another, if you please." "Steady on, old chap. Just give me a bloody refill." Fossett complied. "Hadn't the doctor warned you what to expect?" Fossett asked. Devon sighed. "Yes, he had. I thought I was prepared for my reflection, but I wasn't. I suppose it's like the death of an elderly relative." "How so?" "It's something one expects," Devon said, "but when faced with the inevitable, any remaining vestiges of denial are shattered." "Denial of what?" "That I'm grotesque, that there's nothing left to live for now." Fossett sat beside Devon and took his hand. "Chin up, old boy. There's plenty to live for." Devon snatched his hand away. "Like what? I went through life trading on my looks, revelling in the admiration of every woman who threw herself in my path." "You did more than seduce women, Hart." Devon gave a bitter laugh. "Both you and I know, Fossett, that I'm a terrible soldier. How many times did I nearly get myself, and you for that matter, killed? I'm alive because of you. You're alive in spite of me. You should have left me on that bloody field." "You have much to live for," Fossett said. "A major in the 13th will always garner respect." Fossett's voice had softened, but the last thing Devon wanted was to be bloody well pitied. "Spare me your compassion, Fossett," he said. "We both know my commission was purchased, not earned. Perhaps I should sell it, find some other social climber desperate to purchase a rank to please his overbearing brother." He gestured toward his face. "Perhaps my one consolation is that Dexter will now leave me alone." "I'm sure your brother will want to help you," Fossett said. "Then you don't know him," Devon growled. "He only purchased my commission because he believed I wasn't good enough to be his business partner." "I always thought you appreciated his assistance." "I resented it," Devon said. "It wasn't done out of love, but out of his desire to elevate our social position. He always said I lacked the skills to distinguish myself in business or in the house. A commission was the easiest way he could rid himself of the burden of worrying about whether I'd disgrace the family name." "It can't have been easy for him," Fossett said, "looking after you and your sisters after your parents died. You must admit he's done well, and a self-made man who lifted his family out of poverty is always to be admired." Devon drained his glass and set it aside. "It wasn't easy for the rest of us," he said, "having a brother so driven by the need to increase his social standing that he didn't bother to ask what we wanted. Soldiering at least meant I could be rid of him. But I could never be free. By buying my commission, he made me beholden to him and placed me under obligation to be forever grateful." "Aren't you?" Devon shook his head. "A gesture can only be considered truly generous if it's performed with no expectation of gratitude or return, but out of the simple desire to help another. Dexter expects gratitude, and therefore by definition does not deserve it. There's only one man in this world who deserves my gratitude." "Who?" "You, Fossett. Devon said. "You risked your life to save mine." "I did what any fellow soldier would do." "No," Devon said. "Anyone else would have left me rotting in that damn ditch. Devon the debaucher, Devon the devil, they'd have applauded it as my warranted entry into hell. But you, my friend, you saved my life. I'll be forever in your debt." "Then do as I ask and return to the regiment with me," Fossett said. "Once you've healed, of course." Devon shook his head. "How can I? Unless you think I'll use my face as a weapon to frighten the enemy." He rose and crossed the floor to the bookcase and pulled out a volume of poetry. "Perhaps I'll resume my studies," he said. "Literature, after all, has always been my passion, even if it didn't suit Dexter's ambitions." Fossett nodded encouragement. "An excellent idea. You've always had a talent with words. Think of all those pretty speeches of yours, those lines of verse, which had women flocking to your bed." "No amount of pretty verse would induce a woman to open her eyes, let alone her thighs, at the sight of me now," Devon said. "I dare say even the doxies would charge at least an extra sixpence once they've seen my face." "Do you mean to tell your brother what's happened?" Fossett asked. "Good God, no," Devon said. "Dexter's the last man I wish to see." "He'll want to know." "Dex only wants me to climb the social ladder," Devon said. "Perhaps now I'm a monster, I can be free." "You'd be free if you returned to the regiment," Fossett said. "I'm not like you," Devon replied. "I didn't join for king and country. I joined to escape my brother." "And what will you do?" The image of the beautiful young woman entered his mind. Then he dismissed it. She'd never look at him now. But if he was now a monster, he should embrace his new status. The streets were rife with ruffians who preyed on unsuspecting women and on the naive folk who took in the night air, unaware of the dregs of humanity who scoured London's underbelly for victims. He had earned his just deserts for his life of debauchery. Perhaps now it was time to repay the world by destroying the beasts who lurked in the shadows of London. Until he was destroyed himself. Chapter 2. 4 years later. Hyde Park, London, 1826. The moment the second silhouette appeared beside the first, dark against the backdrop of the moonlight, Lady Atalanta knew she was doomed. Almost as soon as she'd stepped onto the street, the skin on the back of her neck had tightened. He was following her again. The silent shadow, always out of sight save the occasional glimpse of his cloak. Her senses always told her when he was there. At first, she'd been convinced that he was some form of sentinel, watching over her, guarding her from the dangers of the night. But tonight had been different. The initial rush of excitement at the sound of a footstep from behind had faded, to be replaced by crippling fear. She had wanted to escape the party tonight and the cloying attentions of the Duke of Easton, who was nothing more than an old man on the lookout for a biddable wife, to host tea parties and be a stepmother to his spoiled, resentful daughter. He'd never entertained the notion of Atty wanting fulfilment in the form of a worthy occupation. If he knew of her visits to St. George's, her campaign to improve the hospital facilities, and the assistance she provided to Dr. MacGyver when he visited those poor souls of London unable to afford a physician, His Grace would have a fit of apoplexy. The outside, the fresh air, even if taken on the London streets at night, was infinitely preferable to a society ballroom. Often Atty would toy with the suitors and friends who flocked round her at parties, watching the expressions on their faces as they sought to ascertain the most favourable response to her questions. When she asked them about their opinion on the cut of her gown, they would avert their eyes to one side, unconsciously telling her that they were processing the question in order to determine which response would place them deeper in her favour. Atty found it increasingly tedious looking into the eyes of her prospective suitors, hoping to find sincerity, then being sorely disappointed as yet more flattery left their lips. Perhaps she was hoping to see once more the eyes which had haunted her dreams for the past 4 years, ever since she'd caught a glimpse of them in the hospital. She had only set eyes on him for a second. Miss Cruikshank had pulled her away, anxious for their visit to be over. But in that brief moment, he had been imprinted on her mind. He'd been dressed in the uniform of an officer, a bright red coat trimmed with gold, black boots scuffed at the shins, and cream breeches with patches of dirt at the knees. His face had been bandaged, almost completely concealing a head of thick black hair. But the most arresting feature had been his eyes. 2 dark pools of despair which were calling out for solace, and had found it in her. What had happened to him? What heroic feats had he accomplished in battle? Atty had intended to speak to him, but when she'd visited St. George's the following day, he had gone. And though she'd scanned every ballroom and drawing-room since, had rushed to the window every time she'd heard the sound of foot soldiers marching, she had never seen him again. Had he died? Had he succumbed to his injuries? Or worse? "Well, well, what do we have here?" A voice rattled, breaking through Atty's thoughts and returning her to her predicament. The shapes had moved closer, no longer silhouettes, but the thick-set forms of 2 men, one short and balding, the other a heavy, thick-set man. She took a step back. "Not so fast, sweetness." The larger man rattled out a cough and spat on the ground, then he held out his hand. "There's no need to be afraid." He grinned. The skin on the back of her neck tightened as she sensed movement behind her, but the 2 men in front were close now. She took another step back. "Oh no, my lovely," the man said, his accent thick with lust. "That's not very friendly. You'll have a good time with us. We can be friendly if you'll let us, but we'll be ever so disappointed if you're rude. A lady's supposed to be polite." Her stomach churned with revulsion as a whiff of bad breath and stale tobacco reached her nostrils, combined with rancid sweat. Atty mustered her courage and held up her hand. "Stand aside and let me pass," she said. "You have no right to detain a lady thus." She spoke in the frosty tone that deterred unwelcome suitors, but the veneer of the Ice Queen held no power on the streets of London at night, where brutality reigned over social status. The man threw back his head and laughed. "Hear this, John?" he cackled. "This haughty little harlot thinks she's better than us." He reached toward her, and she jerked back. But he was too quick. Thick, fleshy fingers grasped her wrist. "How dare you!" she cried. "John and I will learn you a lesson in manners, wench," he said. She tried to break free, but he tightened his grip. Then he reached inside his jacket, and she caught the glint of moonlight on steel. "Come with us, or it'll be the worse for you." She lowered her head and bit his hand. With a howl, he loosened his grip. She wrenched herself free from his grip and stumbled back. "Bitch!" he cried. "You'll pay for that!" She turned and fled, but only made it a few steps before she collided with what felt like a wall. An arm circled her body and drew her hard against a muscular chest. "Stay still, if you wish to live," a voice hissed in her ear.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?